Glad you all can join us for our campsite fireside chat with Susan Wynn to talk a little bit about kind of the direction that they went in into reference to Workday Planning. Planning and budgeting in higher education is becoming even more important coming out of COVID and having institutions really understand the ability to dynamically plan as the situations change and understand the impact. Having a robust enterprise-wide planning tool is even more important. So Susan's going to share some of her thoughts as they are going through their planning, Workday Planning implementation, and share with you some best practices, gems, reasons why they went through this, and share her campfire stories around Workday Planning. All right, so Susan, do you want to share, first of all, a little bit about ASU's current technology landscape, and specifically what was the tool that you were currently using for planning and budgeting?
So, thanks, Ida, and good morning, everybody. I'm Susan Wynn, and welcome to Flippin' Scary Stories, and I'm happy to answer this question. So as you can see on this PowerPoint that we have, this slide, it's the section in yellow. Right now at ASU, we use an SAP product called BPC, which is Business Objects Planning and Consolidation, and we call it STAR here at ASU. We have a number of systems that kind of feed into it. We've got HR data that comes from PeopleSoft, and we also have financial data that comes from our Workday Financial Management System.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced with your current system?
Okay, so there are numerous, but they are outlined there on that slide. Slow system performance, so it is slow. An unstable platform, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we've had with it, is every time it's deployed onto, it's not cloud-based, it's deployed onto individual client workstations. And so every time there are Windows updates, they corrupt the add-in that it is that's installed, and they have to be reinstalled. It's just kind of a maintenance challenge for it. It does have limitations with the way it manages data because it doesn't do so in the same manner that Workday Finance does. And so our end users aren't able to use all of the optional work tags that they can use in Workday. And it's also reaching its end of life. So the version that we use, which is for the Microsoft SQL Server platform, is being deprecated, and its end of maintenance, its end of life is this year, December 31st. So we knew it was definitely, the time was now to move to another system.
Great. All right. So why Workday Adaptive Planning? What made you choose that platform?
So we started looking at this a couple years, and adaptive planning a couple years ago. And adaptive planning had probably its greatest strengths. There were three really big main positives about it. And one was that it was cloud-based, because, that's the future. Software as a service, platform as a service, everything is going to be online, cloud-based, third-party hosted. And we wanted an application that would support our future site, enterprise budget and planning. So something that would be more scalable with us, to grow with us too. And then something that also integrated with Workday and expressly stated that it integrated with Workday, right? Because we made this investment and commitment to Workday Finance in 2018. And we needed to make sure that our next budget and planning system would integrate with it. And so that said, single sign-on with Workday was also a big selling point too. So that we didn't have to maintain an entirely separate domain just for end user login processes.
So as you went about and started this project, what were the processes and functions that you looked at implementing in your first phase?
Okay, so we have a couple phases going on with this implementations project, and this is Flippin' Scary Stories, and system implementations. Enterprise implementations are always can kind of be pretty flippin' scary, right? Sometimes. Our first phase, which is where we're actually in this process right now, is for annual budget development. We need to make sure that we have the capability to do our primary function, right? Annual budget development, and also the legislative performing too on top of it. But that includes detailed position planning, because that's how you budget position by position, right? In higher ed. And commitments processing and tracking, and budget variance reporting, so we can really examine where we are and where we think we should be, or where we thought we were and where we are now, and why there might be disparity between the two, so that we understand our financial position. And what if modeling is something we expect to be able to have out of this adaptive in phase 1. And internal process for incremental funding requests, even, so that somebody, instead of having big email change for requests for funding, we can have a portal basically to be able to accept funding requests, and then migrate along through an approval process migrate it through an approval process where it then becomes a part of our planning model that we have. Budget transfers or budgeting transfers, I should say, transfers between different departments, transfers intra-departmentally within a department, so you can see the flow of monies and understand the purposes behind them. And then also forecasting. Right now, we do quarterly forecasting, and an interesting aspect of adaptive planning is that everything operates on a month-by-month basis. So we might be changing some of our processes. We will find out more as we go along, but at this time, we're staying with our current forecast process. But sometimes, once you get additional capabilities out of a new system, you go, oh, I can now do whatever this other new thing is, and your processes naturally evolve to go along with it and take advantage of the opportunities for additional functionality that you have.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it kind of leads to the next question about, as you're in this and the process that you're in, you talked a little bit about some of the challenges of your existing system, what functionality you want to roll out. What do you think are going to be the benefits that you're going to realize from the implementation of Workday Adaptive Planning?
So I love how this PowerPoint works perfectly. Yes. Okay. One of the big things, right? We expect to have improved system performance over our current system, and a stable platform, which would be lovely to not have something be crashing and stalling out all the time. So far from our tests, and we've just completed our first round of user acceptance testing with our adaptive planning implementation, and things seem real solid, which is so encouraging for our future right now. And integrated and budget process in a single application, so that you can start and begin all there within the same system, not have to have 4,000 emails going around at the same time. The enhanced management reporting, so we have some new kind of reports and even dashboarding on the way that is coming up. The ability to program business rules into the actual system instead of having to write formulas and spreadsheets to try to create business rules. This actually goes in system, and I can apply them globally or specifically, but there's actually a section for the business rules and assumptions, and that's nice. It also has an audit trail feature, which our current system is missing, and that would be nice too. Hey, how did these changes? Well, I didn't make these changes. Who made these changes? When were they made? Well, we can find that out now. Streamlined integrations and the ability to drill down and back to source system data is huge, because while we know that in our current system, the data we get matches what's in Workday, the data is a summary level data, because that's really what you need for planning and budget, not transactional. If you need transactional data, then you go to the transactional GL system, right? Which is Workday in our case. But right now we have no way to actually reconcile our summary data with the individual transactions. And with Adaptive Insights, it does have the ability for you to drill into that summary data all the way into the individual transactions, which is a really cool feature. And then it's got, of course, the single sign-on that I mentioned before, so that we don't have to manage a separate domain just for sign-on.
Great. It sounds like you guys are looking forward to a lot of things that's actually going to improve, your processes, especially usability. You talked a little bit about and hinted to where you guys are in the planning process. Can you talk a little bit about when you actually started the implementation of this project and where you are right now, and when do you expect to go live, and with who and how many?
We will, absolutely. So this actually addresses one of the questions that I've seen coming in here. What's your time frame to plan and implement this budget tool? Hey, we're getting to that. So our time frame for this, we actually started the project with the implementation in January, mid-January. Like I said, we've actually been thinking about it since 2018. When we were implementing Workday, we knew that we would be needing, it was just a matter of time before we were going to implement a new budget and planning system. We saw the writing on the wall, and which was actually good, a breath of fresh air. We have this next generation cloud-based financial management system. So it's time for us to get our compatible and integrative next generation cloud-based budget and planning system too at the same time, right? But we didn't know what we didn't know yet. So we started that research when we implemented Workday really around 2018, and we had already had our eye on Adaptive Insights, and then Workday looked at, and we had in our contract too, Workday Planning. So, and then those two things kind of merged together, and we went, oh, that's so fortuitous. It's fate there. That worked out perfectly. And then we just started making our timeline and our roadmap to when we were going to implement. Since we had just gone live with Workday in 2018, we didn't want to have a second implementation right on its heels, because we needed to assess how that was operating in the first place to help inform us in the design of our new budget system. So we did take that little bit of time to be able to think about it and plan and create our own roadmap for the implementation of the budget system of adaptive planning. And it also takes time to, update contracts and do an approval process through, everybody's purchasing departments and such too. But anyway, we kicked off with actually doing this work in January. And I think we had a pretty aggressive timeline, January through September. We're looking at a soft go live right now that will happen July 30th, so just next week. And that will be for the purpose of training. So we're training in our sandbox environment. We're going to open that up to all of our end user base, which is about 350 people. And they will have the opportunity to be able to work in that sandbox, that training environment, to learn and work in that before they need to be well-versed in how to operate in the production environment. The production environment is slated to go live on September 15th, and it looks like we're on target for that too. And that also gives us the opportunity to learn a little bit too from our sandbox users, from people as they're going through training. We'll be able to better anticipate any questions that they might have and the ability to support them. Like I said, out of user acceptance testing this last week, it's very encouraging. We didn't really have, find some wood to knock on. There's wood, it's a campfire, right? We have nearby some wood to knock on. It's very encouraging. Nothing really broke or misbehaved. So that was good. We won't need to, that encourages me, saying we were not going to need to try to develop things when we shouldn't need to develop things. And things are pretty much going as planned at this point.
Great. One of the things I'm gonna throw you a curveball. I knew when we were discussing the other day, just users having gone through UAT, you kind of shared a story with us with one of the users that was able to kind of do something on their own. Now, what if you mind if you might sharing with the audience, that individual's experience, going through testing and some of the things that they were able to do.
That was really impressive. Now, she's an amazing person, first of all, but second of all, she's a tech person, and so she really likes to learn new technologies. But we have end users who are like that. So, that's great. This is just an example of what they can do. She went in, we created 4 introductory courses, and we had all of our user acceptance testers take our intro courses: intro to Sheets, intro to adaptive planning itself, intro to reports and setting up Sheets, because in user acceptance testing, we had them test out data input as well as reporting, and as well as just get to learn the look and feel of how the environment works, just generally speaking. And we also had some supported work papers for work instructions for them too, so that they could reference some other materials. It was pretty minimal. It was for the purpose of accomplishing user acceptance testing and then also learning what else we needed to grow with regard to the training materials. Where would we really need to focus our ending efforts here? And so she went in, she did her data entry, she made notes about it, she did reports, and she was like, I don't really like the way this report is working for me. I'm gonna modify it. We had nothing about modifying reports or building them on your own, just how to use the existing ones that we had already built for them. And she did an amazing job. She went in, she was fearless, and the report interface isn't that hard to understand either. She pulled up the help, the Workday Adaptive Planning help, and looked through it, and I can just take this element and drag it and drop it over here, and now it'll show me the stuff that I really do want to see, some additional detail that she was looking for. So she just went in, modified one of the reports that we had created, and made them more useful to her need, which was pretty neat, because that wasn't part of our testing scenarios. That wasn't one of our test scripts. And she was very pleased with the products. So far, our feedback is that it's very positive from that test group. It was about 40 people in our test group.
Thanks for sharing that, Susan. Thanks. So what are the budget users excited about, right? What are they looking forward to as you're starting to communicate this is coming? You've got some users already in there, doing UAT testing. Can you talk a little bit about what the excitement and buzz is all around?
Yeah, number 1 and number 2. thing 1 and thing 2 over there. I'd say the number 1 thing is the stability, actually. So I put them in a reverse order, but nonetheless, drill back and integration to Workday. That single sign-on feature is going to be lovely. And then no longer having to deal with desktop changes as a result of the Windows updates. Yeah, for sure. That kind of goes along with the system stability being one of the biggest, most important. Performance and stability. It's just you don't realize that's something that should just be an expectation out of any kind of technical system that you're using. It's not something that you should have to be thinking about or worrying about at the back of your head. While I'm doing this data input for my budgets under a deadline, am I going to have the system crash and freeze on me where I have to restart it and then re-log in and then you shouldn't have to think about that. I think that's probably one of the number 1 things that we're looking forward to, but also it's just sheer functionality too at the same time. Yep, stability, new functionality, and accessibility to it. Yeah.
So you all had in the beginning sort of planned a very innovative implementation model from the start. And as a result of that, you actually benefited from being prepared for what we weren't expecting, which is a pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about the implementation model that you all had decided to use to roll this out and how that prepared you, for being successful through this pandemic?
So, since we are ASU and we're all about innovation, right? One of the things which I don't know in our tech-enabled world, and we still do a lot of work face-to-face. And I think that probably has happened a lot in higher ed. Certainly when I was listening to a lot of the discussions in the earlier sessions that we were in and around the flagpole, I don't know if anybody was in there, that we were talking about, one of the topics was about shifting from face-to-face to remotely. And we had already planned to do this, well, largely as a cost savings effort, but also just because we could. So, I mean, if you can, why not? So that you can maximize your expenditures to where you want them to be, which is in your development and in your design, right? Serving the actual people, not spending it on travel, or serving the project and the purpose and the stakeholders of the project, and not necessarily on travel. So we had actually already planned out the entire implementation to focus on being remotely based, including our UAT process too, our user acceptance testing process. Fortunately, that paid off really well. Fortunately for us, that really actually, because we had planned that original innovative approach, it ended up working out due to everybody needing to move remotely. And so we had almost no disruption from COVID-19 to our project at all, which is a big boon, was a big boon for us, because as life was disrupted everywhere for so many people and still is being, so this project was able to just continue on as planned, as originally planned, without needing to vary.
Right. Okay. So you talked about flipping scary stories. So, I think every implementation you learn something coming out of it. What are some of the things that you can share as lessons learned coming out of this implementation for others that may be looking to go down this path?
So I will say data. Know your data. Know the data that you want to migrate and start planning that early on. Availability of resources. Yeah, absolutely. That was the second thing. Those are the two things that I have in my notes too. Start early, knowing your data, gathering your data, know your system data that you're going to migrate, know the data that you plan on having in the future on top of that, right? And then know your schedule and your resource availability, and don't let up. When we were planning this, our busiest time for budget is in June and July in our budget office with our project resources. That's also kind of the busiest time that this project has been. And we knew that this time period was going to be, these 2 months were going to be pretty intense for us. So it's important to kind of be prepared going in, know your schedule, know your resource availability, and plan accordingly. Understand where you're building that slack that you might need, that leeway, understanding that, hey, if this is a time when your office's operations are going to be have a heavy demand on your resources anyway, then plan accordingly around that, right? So we actually did push it hasn't been visible to our external stakeholders, to our end user population, but we did end up taking up 2 weeks of slack that we had planned, a possibility to need this summer due to budget operations, just general office budget operations requiring our attention, our project staff people's attention, because this is a pretty small, amazing team that we have working on this project.
I would agree with that, Susan. You and Larry have been amazing and have done a lot of work, considering two individuals trying to shepherd this project through, again, during a pandemic and, pretty much staying on target. So kudos to you all for being able to do that. So what's next? We're in there working with you all to build the foundation. You talked a little bit about what phase one looks like, and the great thing about this tool, it has the ability to grow and do, additional things as institutions, move into different business processes. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the next things that you all planned, coming out of this for the next phases of implementation to be able to do with Workday Adaptive Planning?
Right. So we did say that we had multi-phases for this project, right? And in the first phase is get it running and get our core functionality, as well as some enhanced features, taking advantage of some of the easier enhanced features to integrate and implement into this project. So next, we'll have additional plan commitment functionality to be able to better manage those enterprise plan commitments, right? Centrally allocated. ASU-wide long-range financial planning, so be able to take advantage of more and greater scenario long-range planning that's in system and not just in a lot of spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets. That unit level driver-based long-range planning, and extend that long-range financial planning ability out to our end user population too. That's not part of our phase one, but we will have additional versions available for them to be able to use for their internal use for colleges and the VP areas, the operational areas, to be able to use for their own long-range planning. And then they can it'll all be in system, and when system, they could take that information and incorporate that into their forecasts and their budgets as desired. And then tuition and enrollment data models. So that will be something completely new. It's always been kind of a wish list item that we've had to incorporate into our budget and planning system, but our current platform just wasn't really robust enough to manage that. So we're really looking forward, so we've not done this before, and we're really looking forward to exploring and embracing that tuition enrollment data models, and then hoping it's on our roadmap, it's in our plans, so we should be able to get that done.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your insights into kind of where you guys came from, how you made your decision, where you're going, and kind of, sneak peek of what you're already seeing as the benefits of the application. So with that, any additional things that you want to share before I turn it over to Ashley to kind of moderate our question and answer session?
I think I've talked about that. Like I said, I think my biggest advice for people would be plan your roadmap, know what's coming from as much as you can from other areas of the university too. Like, for instance, we know that our university technology office, that ASU enterprise-wide, we have system blackout periods at various times throughout the year when we don't want to make any changes to other systems, even though they're not student-based systems. We still try not to pull away our IT resources from their very important tasks of making sure that the student-facing systems are functioning to the best of their ability and receiving the updates that they need and everything else. So just make sure that as you plan your schedule, you're looking at enterprise activities as well, not just your own office.
Okay. All right. All right, Ashley.
I know we have questions.
Okay, yeah. So Graniel asked, is there any reason you didn't opt for Workday Planning in 2018?
And I addressed that a little bit. So we actually had Workday Planning in our contract, but when we started looking at it, it really didn't have an adequate function, mostly for budgeting position level. It just allowed for some kind of headcount bucket budgeting, which is not how we budget at ASU and at other universities that I've spoken with also. We need that position level budgeting, and that capability just wasn't there at the time. And also kind of the fund accounting aspect wasn't as robust at the time either. So we knew that there were new releases and it was constantly growing, that Workday was growing Workday Planning at the time. But we had also, like I said, had our eye on Adaptive Insights because we had scoped that as a good product. In fact, a few products, Anaplan Adaptive and Axiom, which were like the three top in the sphere at the time, and they may still be at this time too. But when Adaptive Insights went over to Workday, and now it's Workday Adaptive Planning, that was just a fantastic synchronization that occurred for us, and I think for the Workday customers too, that are probably going to be pretty happy with that, or probably already are.
Cool. You have time for one more question?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, so
Yeah.
Robert asks, what's the single biggest piece of advice you would give to a campus that is about to embark upon an Adaptive Insights project?
So, well, I think I did that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, know your resources, know your data, plan your schedule, right? Understand the activities occurring around your campus at the time, and decide on your approach. Like I said, our approach, we decided early on we were going to have kick off our project with live in-person meetings and discovery sessions so that everybody got the opportunity to meet the project team and build faith and credibility with that project team. But then after that, all of our execution was completely and totally remote. Now, that might not be the right choice for everybody. It depends on what the capabilities and the comfort level are of your staff with that. Of course, in our current pandemic world, it might be a necessity, even if it's not really your natural way of operating. But just so know what's going to work for you. And I wanted to do one more. I can read these questions. There's one interesting here that I'd be interested to know what your approach to operational support will be, who will maintain and enhance your model as they need to change. So we have 1.5 people, FTE, that are designated to manage and maintain the system, along with 30-day post-go live contract that we have from Huron. And we also have a support contract too with I think 1 or 2 vendors. That's not really my area, but I did want to address it, that are part of our Workday contract as well. And since the Adaptive Planning, the Workday Adaptive Planning contract is within our Workday Finance contract. So that might be something, if you already have Workday Finance or other Workday products, you might want to be looking at having your purchasing people or your contracts people talk about how your support that way can work into your existing contractual models.
And just to add on to that too, I think one of the things that's important is that identifying who those individuals are that are going to be supporting the application, and have them intricately involved in the implementation from day one. Susan and her team and the 1.5 FTEs that are going to be responsible have been involved from day one. So they understand all of the decisions that were made around, why do we choose to go in this direction? Why do we choose to build it this way? They've been able to see kind of, the behind the scenes magic, right, Susan?
Yes, exactly.
How things are built, so that, when we turn this over to them, at least they have the wherewithal to know, some of the pieces and parts, to how this is actually being created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's another question that talks about, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. We had, there's a question about capital planning where that's one of our future implementation phase items actually is for capital planning. So we're not actually doing that right now, but that is a future phase. It's on our future phase roadmap.
And I'll take this one. I think we got time for this one. I'm going to ask this, is all this modeling and long-range planning functionality part of the tool, or is an additional component that has to be purchased? It actually is part of the tool. You know, we talked about the great thing about this tool is that it's a toolkit that you can build on, you know, so we start with the foundation and build from there. So all of the next features and functions that Susan laid out as in reference to her phase 2 are all going to be built with the existing functionality that they've already purchased. So that's the great thing about having a tool that can expand with you as you grow.
And I'll just tag on. It's a much better tool than what we have. It is like many technology products. It is do not expect it to be a panacea for all of your problems to solve all the problems that you might possibly have, but it could be a great improvement over what you've currently got too. So just understand that everything comes with its own quirks, and we're accepting of that right now. And they have a pretty robust, Workday has a pretty robust feedback mechanism to be able to listen to suggestions that you might have for the product. Anything is better than modeling Excel. Yes, I know.
we agree, Tara.
Yes.
Do we have time for a few? I see there's one new question that came in. Do we have time?
Yes, you have 2 minutes. So if you think you can answer that in about 2 minutes, go ahead.
All right. Do you see the one that says, do budget versus actual reports exist in Workday and Adaptive? If in Adaptive, perhaps for ease of use, user-defined report modifications, how did you decide where to put these reports for which population of users?
It depends on how you decide what your user base is and what they're going to do. So in adaptive planning, the way reporting works is if it's in the shared folder, pretty much everybody has access to it. You can't really control who's got access to what report. I mean, you can. There are ways to do that. They're just very cumbersome and unique to the report. You can control the individual on report by report, but not necessarily like by folders type of thing. So everybody has the ability to look at for their area, because that's the way the security works, is you work on security base. If you have Workday Finance, we've got cost centers, and so security is based pretty much on the cost centers, like in Workday, in adaptive planning, like how it is in Workday. So you can control what people see based upon that cost center, which is called a level in adaptive planning. So even though they might have all the same reports available to them, like budget versus actual reports, they're only seeing the reports just for their area or their cost centers that the permission has been assigned for.
All right. So I think, Ashley, we are out of time. I think we answered, it looks like we've gotten through all of the questions, but if there's anything that we missed, we said that we definitely would follow up with you all. So thank you again for attending our fireside chat. Hopefully this was informative to you all, especially for those of you all who may be looking at, you know, going down this path yourself. And as Tara said, anything is better than Excel, and this is definitely better than Excel. So welcome your feedback. And again, thank you for taking the time to join us for our little fireside chat. And thank you, big thank you to Susan for sharing her insights, experience, and knowledge as she's been going through this process real time and live.
Experiencing the whole thing. But thank you everybody for coming, and thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. If you do have questions, yeah, feel free to shoot an email to us. Did you have an email in that, or it's, well, at asu-budget.system@asu.edu. So I'll open that up.
All right, thank you.